Welcome to the Church Solutions Podcast, brought to you by JSL Solutions. The Church Solutions Podcast is designed to help equip you and your church in the use of technology and other tools and services. And now, here are your hosts, Steve Lacy and Phil Thompson.
Well, hello and happy 2019. Welcome to another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast.
Hi, my name is Steve Lacy.
And I'm Phil Thompson, and it is the first week, at least when we're recording this, the first week of 2019. How are you doing in this brand new year, Steve?
I am trying to stay warm under this frozen tundra we live in.
I know this is really hard for us. We're in Tucson, Arizona, and we actually had an overnight low was like around, at least where I was, I think it was around 28 or 29 degrees, and there's actually some snow going on in different parts of Tucson as we speak.
Yes, my wife just informed me that there's a slight bit of, I don't know, she called it snow, but it sounds like it's just very faint fuzzies in the air.
Yeah, that's generally what we get around Tucson. We don't get a lot of snow, but there's at least east of town here, southeast in the Vail, Tucson area, they had a couple inches, and of course up north they get a little more.
Yeah, we've had some winters where there's snow on the ground, and even had an Easter in April where
that's right.
We're out playing and making snowballs, and
remember that very well. Yeah.
Yes, it's very unusual.
We had a church picnic, and it was we had to modify it a little bit. I remember that. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about our podcast. We are a tech company, of course, but we also work, and we do work exclusively with churches and ministries, and so therefore the topics that we cover on these podcasts are all over the place, but the one theme is helping ministries, helping churches, and we do that with tech, but also from our many, many years of experience in ministry, personally as well as professionally. And today we're going to talk about how you can maybe reach some more people in 2019 if you're a pastor, executive pastor, a key volunteer at your church. Hopefully you want to see your church, your ministry reach more people.
Right, exactly. And I guess the topic of our talk is called How to Be More Compelling.
How to be more compelling in 2019. So it's no secret that, there's a stat out here that it's taken about 3 generations for weekly church attendance to slide from 50% of Americans to now 25%. Of Americans attend church at least weekly, and that's from the Pew Research Company. And so there's lots of reasons, I think, why people are not going to church as often. But one of the main points is that it has to be compelling. And, of course, that's tough because compelling means a lot of different things to different people. But the bottom line is we want to have it where our friends invite people. We want to make it so our services reach more people, and compelling is the word here. And I know that's kind of a tough task here, but we're going to try to tackle it.
Compelling, relevant. Yeah, compelling, I guess, is a good way to characterize it.
Our buddy Tony Morgan says the main reason people are not inviting others, and by the way, let me jump ahead here, I'm getting off track, but many times people will come to church for the first time because a friend invites them. In fact, one stat from one particular church that Tony Morgan was working with said that 80% of their first-time guests came from personal invitations. That's a pretty good number, but if your services aren't really that compelling, it may even limit the people that you have coming from inviting their friends.
Right, and we should probably put our own stats together, because with the advent of streaming, it makes it so much more easier for your friends to attend a service than it was before. So I bet you there's some really good numbers. I know at our church I was at 80% of the time they interviewed new members of how you found the church, and they said, well, I attended online. Then I decided to come check it out.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, that's a shameless plug for us because we do online streaming, streamingchurch.tv.
Well, it's a shameless plug for streaming. So yes,
yeah.
No matter who you use.
So let's get to the bottom line here is how, and again, I'm sure there's some people rolling their eyes right now because you want to reach people, but that word compelling, how do you make your services more compelling? And so I want to tackle that because I think we need to look into that. And I think it's a great opportunity to go forward this year. So I think, it's January, it's a new year. Let's see if we can reach some new people. How can we get our services, our church services more compelling?
All right, so we need to plan our services with both believers and unbelievers in mind.
Yeah, I think that's very important.
Yes, with the active word plan, right?
Yeah. And that's the hardest part. And look, I was a senior pastor for about 8 years. I've been an executive pastor for many years off and on, and I'm actually a part-time executive pastor right now for a church that has about 100 people. And of course, the streaming is my full-time gig here, but planning is tough because most pastors love to put together messages, but many of them don't want to sit down and go, okay, well, we got to plan this year out. We got to plan this and that. But honestly, if you want to get somewhere, you're going to have to make the time and get some people to work with you when it comes to planning things. And so there's several things you can do to make that work better.
Right. So Tony Morgan outlines this 6-step process. So let's go through those really quickly. And I think quick. There's creating a teaching calendar.
Yeah.
Do series planning, where you're figuring out what the series are going to be and when. I know that it's interesting listening to our pastor. He says, I've got 2019 and 2020 planned out for you every Sunday for the next 2 years. So
that's interesting that he would do that. Yeah. But
well, it's maybe not 2 years in advance, but I think a year in advance. He definitely has.
Yeah.
So anyway, series planning, service planning how the service is going. And then this is one of the things that we do, and I guess your church does as well, and many churches, is a pre-service rundown.
Yeah.
Kind of go through the service with all those that are involved in it.
Yeah.
And then actually conducting a compelling service. And then the piece that we're going to talk about more is the post-service evaluation.
Yeah, I want to talk about post-service evaluation. We can elevate that too, but I want to talk about that because, as you said, the teaching calendar, that's where you really look at the whole year and decide, what's going to go, and we do that. And the planning, if you do sermons based on a series, good way to do that. Planning gets the actual service planning goes a little deeper, and the pre-service is, okay, here's what's going to happen today. So let's talk about post-service evaluation. So if you follow this plan, you can be on your way to this, but what is a post-service evaluation? Now, I do this every week with my senior pastor, but we're talking something that's a little deeper here. I mean, I do it every week where we sit down and we talk about what went wrong, what went right, how could we have done things better. And then, honestly, we don't take a lot of time. I mean, if there's something weird happened or something didn't go right, we might cover that. We try to get some feedback from people through our connection cards, and so we take that into account. But when we talk about a post-service evaluation, we want to drill down a little deeper here.
Right. So we're talking about doing more than just doing this evaluation for a few minutes with those that were involved in the service. Right. This is kind of a structured approach to how to do this post-service evaluation.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I know it takes time. I know it's not the most glamorous thing. And by the way, if you don't do a weekly post-service evaluation with your staff, you really should. But we're talking something here that's probably monthly. So let's go down here and talk about who should be a part of this if you really want to consider making some changes. And by the way, I know what we're talking about here might be really new to some people, or at least something that may not be the most compelling thing, speaking of compelling services, but I think it's important to consider a couple things here. And that would be getting some evaluation and feedback from more than just people around you on your staff, but even some people that maybe are not on staff.
Right. So you kind of glossed over the making it monthly thing.
Yeah, well,
and
let's
I think
talk
what
about
that does.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of churches, I think, will go over the quick meeting after each service, but the monthly thing, what that kind of lets you have some room to breathe to kind of get a series of things together. And this, what we're talking about, I think, is a more formal evaluation. So you wouldn't, you get kind of worn out every week going up. Jerry missed his note on the bass again, and whatever, whatever it may be. You get those kind of nitpicking things, but this is more of a kind of taking the whole service apart with a broader audience, a little deeper dive. So that Tony Morgan recommends making this thing monthly.
Right.
So,
I know for some people it's like, okay, another thing I have to schedule. But the first thing I would say is make it monthly, make it at a certain time. I don't know, maybe Saturday morning, something where you can get, because some of these people you want involved in this would be people that are not staff. I mean, the staff can be a part of it, but people that may work during the week because they're volunteers or they're key members of your church. So probably something like a Saturday morning might be good, and I would consider enticing them with some kind of food, coffee, and donuts. I don't know.
And I think it's important to focus on a diverse set of people that you might not normally include in, hey, come to a Sunday morning, and some real specific people. So yeah, that may be if it's monthly, and then you're pulling, since you're going diverse, you're not, it's not people on staff that feel like, oh, I got to be there. It may be the single mom that's only there every couple of weeks and get her vantage point on things.
Yeah, I think if you can get if you're able to grab a few people, you might want to start small. Start with maybe 3 or 4 people if you can do that. Maybe male, female, age differences, just depending on what you're trying to do here.
Right, and you should probably line up that audience with the people that you're trying to reach in your community.
Absolutely.
So that, for example, if there's the male or attendance at church is much lower than female, and if you're trying to target, I don't know, you're trying to target youth, or you're trying to target a younger generation, or you're trying to target men, you're going to want to make sure that you include the voices in your diverse feedback group that represent those groups that you're trying to reach.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So you gather these group of people, and then probably the next point would be make decisions. Make decision rights clear and decision rights. So in other words, you're going to talk about some things that you want to do, and then eventually you're going to come down to somewhat final decisions on something.
Right. So you're going to get feedback from a diverse group of people, and I think it's important to kind of delineate what the role of everyone is in this group. It's not going to be this single mom that attends once a month. She doesn't get to decide what the next service series is going to look like.
Right.
She may be providing some feedback on what worked for her, what didn't work for her, but you want to make it really clear what the roles are of people in this monthly meeting. So the first group that Tony Morgan outlines is just people that are there to just kind of observe, view what's going on.
Yeah, he uses the 3 V's here: vote, voice, and view. And if you're a senior pastor listening to this, or even an executive pastor, that can scare you a little bit. So give us a chance to try to explain this. But I think, there should be people there are simply viewing the ins and outs of planning a service. And so this is, again, a great opportunity for leadership development, perhaps, especially if you've got some younger people that might have a desire to be involved in ministry themselves. And it allows them to kind of see, what's the term, see how the sausage is made,
right?
So that, you can get a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, and get into some of the ideas behind the scenes here, the systems of the church. And they are not there to give really any input per se. They're just there to kind of watch and learn. That's, again, I think a good thing to consider. That
always bringing up that next generation,
Right.
So that's view, and then voice.
Voice is the next
people that we've invited to speak directly into the service. So their voice is valued, and everything they say and do is taken very seriously.
And so you want the caliber of people that you can trust. They might have different ideas than you do, but they're good people. they're committed to the church. They're committed to seeing the church grow and reach people. Those are the kind of people you want. You don't want just somebody in there just mouthing off and just, always unhappy about something.
Right.
That's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And I don't know if we elaborated on it earlier, but you don't want to just, you want to speak to both the unbelievers and the believers in your congregation. So you want this group to represent both. Otherwise, the unbelievers that come, and if you're just speaking to the believers every week, they say, well, this is not for me because I'm not there yet. And so, yeah. So anyway.
And let me just also add something to that as well. You just mentioned, that's a good point. Anytime you're talking about making changes, it can upset the apple cart for some people. Mm-hmm. And so most humans do not like change. And so, I've run across this in every church I've been in. Even the church I helped start, I started with 4 families and they were used to doing church a certain way. And so when I came and said, hey, you guys want to do this? Yeah, let's do it. We want to start this. Okay, we're going to start fresh, which means we're going to do things differently than what you may be used to. And it was difficult for them. And then the last group I've been a part of the last 5 years, I came in and we started doing things differently, and it created friction for some people because like, oh, we're doing things differently. Oh my gosh, we can't do that. We've never done it like that before. And it can be challenging, and that's a whole nother podcast to deal with that. But just keep in mind, you want to have some people that they may not be crazy about change, but at least they're open to some ideas.
Right.
All right. So voice. You want the voice. You want the view. And here's one that I don't like the terminology here, but he's got vote. Tony Morgan put down vote. That's the other thing about this group of people. So what he says here, once all has been heard, these people, the people that have the ability to make some decisions here or help make some decisions, they get the vote on what changes and what stays the same. This should be the fewest amount of people, and these are the leaders of the church or specific ministries affected by the decision. So in other words, I would think, I don't like the vote thing, but I think the idea here is they have some, they can give you some input and help make some decisions.
Right, yeah. You want to get the input from the voice, but you do want the leadership that is responsible for that church making the final decisions of what's going on. So things that I assume that would come up in these sort of things would be worship went on too long. And so I would rather have less worship and more teaching, or vice versa. The teaching went on too long and I'd rather have more worship. And those would be some significant changes to a service, but that may be really hard to transition. But if you've done a good job identifying the people you're trying to reach and you get valid feedback from those target audiences, you really need to have the courage to start making some of those changes that are, based on their feedback.
And some of this, as we talk about this podcast about being compelling, some of this also depends on how your leadership team is structured and the roles that your leadership team, like the church I go to, and yours is very similar to this, I know, the staff primarily makes most of the day-to-day decisions and even a lot of the ministry decisions on how services are run. That's a staff usually that does that. The leadership team is more of the accountability thing. Are we staying on track? Are we fulfilling the vision? Are we keeping with the things we've put in our bylaws on what we want to do as a church? That's what my church does. And your church I was a part of that for many years, is very similar in the same way. But again, when you put this team together for, evaluating things every month, you definitely want to make these roles clear. And you can certainly make them a part of the team when it comes to maybe making some decisions, but you just want to make sure that this stuff is defined well. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of tension and a lot of stress.
Right. That's something you probably want to set up early as you go through these meetings, that this is not a blame session,
right?
Or Jerry missed his notes on the bass. It's which is a non-attribution, feedback thing.
Yeah, exactly. So you get people giving you some decision making here, helping you do that. They help make the call, And the bottom line is this: what we're talking about here is being intentional, and it's about reaching the lost, people that don't come to church. And to do that means you need to be intentional about your weekend services, because most of these people, if they're going to come, they're going to come to a Sunday service or a weekend service. And so that means you're constantly evaluating things, you're tweaking things, making changes, you're doing everything you can to make it a better experience so that you can reach people and reach as many people as possible. Because after all, people should not be leaving our churches because they're not compelling. I mean, they can be leaving the churches because the message of following Christ might be too big of a challenge for them. They may not want to give up certain things. That might be a good reason to leave, because, hey, I'm not willing to be a Christian. I'm not willing to really carry the cross. But they shouldn't be leaving because your services are dull and irrelevant.
Right.
Is that word irrelevant? So they need to be coming, and when you make these things compelling, that does take energy, it takes work, it takes effort. And that's the thing that most of us don't, who are senior pastors and love to speak, that can be difficult. That's a difficult discipline, is what I'm trying to say, is, okay, I'm going to need to make time, schedule time to do planning and to schedule time. And in this case, what we've been talking about today, doing some post-evaluation stuff.
Right. And I think it's really important to, just reiterating this voice versus the vote piece of this. My brother's church got into a position where they were kind of, the voice was starting to move over into the vote arena.
Okay.
And what was going on was, some of the voice was, what we really ought to do is play the Steelers game on Sunday morning on the screen while the service is going on, or they were getting into, we need to be more social and less of this Jesus stuff, and that's where the leadership of the church needs to step up and say, hey, we're here on a mission to reach the lost.
Right.
And so that's things can really get out of whack if you mix up you mix up the voice and the vote roles there.
Right, and I think a good way to always open up any meeting, and we actually do this with our leadership team, is that we actually have, we have our vision. That's the very first thing that we always kind of remind each other about. And I think it's even for a meeting like this. What's our vision? Okay, we're going to do some post-evaluation. And don't forget our vision, whatever that vision is. Hopefully your church has a mission and vision statement of some kind, and that helps keep you on track. Because, our vision is, whatever it might be, not to play the Steelers. I mean, although Steelers are my favorite football team, and I am so disappointed in them the last couple of years, especially this year. I am so disappointed. I'm sorry. Tomlin needs to go. They need to fire the coach. I've never been a crazy Tomlin fan, but that team has too many talents, too many tools to not be winning 12 or 13 games a year, let alone missing the postseason. But people, I'm sure they can give us some feedback on that later.
Touched a nerve, huh?
Oh, it just frustrates me to no end. But anyhow, so that's it, I guess, right? I mean, we're talking about 2019 here, being more compelling. It does take effort. It does take some work. But if we can set aside the time as leaders in our churches, if we can really set aside the time to plan these things out, to do some of these things we talked about, like post-service evaluation, it can make a big difference and help our church grow, help our church reach people in 2019, and help us stay on track with our vision and our mission.
All right. Sounds great.
All right. Good enough. Well, not the most glamorous podcast, but I think one of the most important. And we would love to get your feedback on that today. Thank you for listening to the Church Solutions Podcast. You can get a hold of us by sending us an email, support@streamingchurch.tv. That's one of our domains because we do churchapplive.com, streamingchurch.tv. We do myflock.com. Lots of things we do to help churches and ministries use technology. And so support@streamingchurch.tv would be a good way to get a hold of us. Love to get your feedback on this. And we're looking forward to serving you and your church, not only with this podcast in this next year, but also other tools and services that we can help you to help build your church and help you fulfill your purpose and mission.
Sounds great.
All right, we're done. He is Steve Lacy. I am Phil Thompson. We wish you a very happy new year. We will catch you next time on another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast. Take care.